Every 10 years, an abandoned ship appears carrying a crew of ghosts with it. The ship is called the Octavius, and it has a terrifying tale to tell. It was first seen back in 1853 when it appeared out of nowhere near the Danish island of Anholt. Back then, it was still under sail and no one had been seen on board for months. So the locals became very suspicious. Eventually, the ship was brought into port, and that's when they realized no one was actually on board. There were no living people, at least. Word got around that the ship had reappeared after being lost at sea for so long, and the townspeople became convinced that the whole thing was some kind of supernatural occurrence. The ship had been gone for so long, and yet there was not a single sign of wear or tear on it. It almost looked like it had just set off from somewhere else and then decided to drop anchor right off the coast of the island. The ship also didn't have any way of being moved by the current. There was no rigging on the masts, which meant that if the wind had somehow managed to catch them, the ship could have easily been swept away from its location. But this wasn't the case. The ship remained right where it had anchored all those months ago. There was also something very strange going on inside the ship. When people went on board, they noticed that everything was exactly where it should be, as if the crew had just stepped off the ship for a quick stretch. In fact, the ship was in such good condition that the local captain decided to take the Octavius out for a spin. He wanted to see if he could figure out how such a large vessel could just reappear out of thin air. As they set sail, he noticed a collection of old journals and letters on board, and while reading through them, he discovered that the last entry had been written in December of 1842. This would have been about 10 years before the ship was rediscovered. And the final entry mentioned nothing of any sort of incident happening on board, nor did it mention that the crew had planned on doing anything that would cause them to abandon ship. But the more he looked around, the more he realized that they hadn't actually abandoned ship. The crew had simply vanished. Things like their clothes, personal belongings, food, even the ship's cat were all still there. It was like the entire crew had just disappeared into thin air. And that's why when the Octavius reappeared again 10 years later, people were convinced that it was a ghost ship. It was as though the crew had sailed the ship back to Denmark every decade since they had first arrived. But there was one thing that no one could explain, and that was why. Why would a ship full of ghosts keep reappearing? People came up with all sorts of theories. Some said that the crew had been cursed. Others said that the ship had been built over a portal to the underworld. But the truth is, no one really knows what happened to the crew of the Octavius. All we know for sure is that the ship was sailing along quite normally, and then suddenly everyone on board vanished. The only thing that we can be certain of is that this was definitely not normal. To this day, the mystery of the ghost ship remains unsolved. Every 10 years, it returns to the exact same spot, carrying the same crew of ghosts with it. It's almost as if the ship is some sort of time capsule, forever frozen in time. And while it may never reveal what happened to the crew, one thing is for sure, they're not coming back for another 10 years. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe so you never miss a new video. See you next time.